Let's get the first word on this, out and early for everyone. Bismarck, an economist and Channels Television Economic Counselor, is live to us from our studios in downtown Lagos at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Mr. Rwani, thank you very much. Good morning. It's good to have you. Let's have your first word. First on the SEC and the new Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission.
I think it's very interesting that it's coming up at this time because we have the Federal Consumer and Protection Act, which has become a law signed by the President since January 31st. It's now effective. And we have the Investment and Securities Act, which set up the Investment and Securities Tribunal. What is happening here is that you've got to step back a little bit and look at the entire economy. The economy is, the value of the economy in GDP for the year is about $450 billion. Of this amount, $366 billion is consumption, and $66 billion investment. So you can see both in value and in quantity and number, consumers are more than investments. The number of consumers are more than the investors, and the aggregate consumption is higher than aggregate investment. To that extent, the fact that now the federal government of Nigeria has passed this act is moving in the right direction in terms of actually trying to protect consumers. But like you said earlier, there's a big distinction between being a consumer and being an investor. But you can also be an investor and be a consumer. So what is this all about? It is to protect consumers from anti-monopolistic actions, from duopolistic and oligopolistic exploitation of consumers. Consumers must have choice in terms of price, must have choice in terms of what they can buy, and must have choice in where they can buy it. Those things are protected. And what this law is saying is that there's subsidiary legislation and superior legislation. The superior legislation in this particular case is the FCPA, and is subsidiary or the secondary legislation is that of the Investment and Securities Tribunal. Now there's coordination between the Securities and Exchange Commission on one hand and this new body, and there's a transition arrangement. What is important is to look at examples of where there has been abuse of consumer protection in the past. In this country, there was the fuel surcharge, which was imposed by British Airways and Virgin Atlantic at the time, and it was actually hidden under a fuel surcharge, while in fact what they did was to actually increase the fares. There was a class action suit, both in Nigeria and all over the world, and British Airways and Virgin Atlantic actually had a plea bargain and agreed to pay the charges. The same thing has happened where telephone companies come together to collude to fix prices, and it happens also with other products. So the Nigerian regulatory environment is now becoming actually more mature and more efficient. But at the same time, it puts on them a very, very serious level of responsibility. Because if, for example, somebody was to come in with expired drugs into the market, you have NAFDAC and you have the Consumer Protection. The Consumer Protection Act takes precedence over the NAFDAC Act, right? So it's the same thing for Nigerian Standard Organization. There's so many things, but clearly this is it puts manufacturers and providers of service on notice that you cannot exploit consumers. It also puts investors, gives investor protection, because any combination, let us say Olam and Dangote came together, there have been Access and Diamond coming together. And any of these combinations of schemes of arrangement must not do anything to undermine the choice of consumers. As we speak, Facebook is being investigated by the Senate of the United States as having no substitute and cornering the market. And Facebook says the alternative to us is Twitter, but Twitter is not the same thing as Facebook. They're totally different. And so we are now having that situation where Facebook is having to deal with security issues, but also to deal with consumer protection issues.
Mr. Rwani, I'm sure you know that where we've had most of Nigeria's history in business combination or M&A is in the banking industry, at least in particular, since in 2000 the M&A, which was basically the banking sector consolidation of Soludo's, the central bank, and of course, the current Emir of Kano, Lamido Sanusi, back then in 2009, took some banks off the street and there were a bit of M&A. So do you think this is something that the financial services industry should pay more attention to, since, like you rightly said, we have more of a consuming economy than an investment one?
Well, you take a very, very, very important example. In the financial services industry, there are three levels of stakeholders. One, there are depositors, and you have the depositor insurance scheme. Two, there are investors who own shares in banks, right? And three, there are consumers who use their services. If, for example, the banks were to come together to say, we are going to increase our ATM charges, and they all came together and made a phone call, just a phone call, and you can record that phone call and say that the MD of one bank talked to the, or the bankers committee met at night to decide to increase the ATM charges from 100 naira to God knows what, to 105 naira, 120 naira. That constitutes an act, a criminal act, and a breach of that law, right? So if COT was to be increased and people went behind and colluded to, all of them agreed to charge the same amount for account maintenance, then that would be collusion. So when you talk about financial services, there's that protection of the consumer. You can be a customer of a bank without being a depositor of the bank. You can be a depositor of the bank without being an investor in its shares. So all of these things are put together. So how are you protected from exploitation? One, from the bank that you use. Two, from a combination of banks coming together to fix prices and reduce choice. And three, how are you protected if your bank is acquired by another bank and then your shareholder value is destroyed? All of these things put together are why this is very important for the financial services industry. And especially, we say this because consumers are being screwed constantly in this country by a combination of producers. But at the same time, you need scale economies. People have to be motivated to invest in the business. If you start to protect the consumers and that disincentivizes the investors in the banking system, then you will have no growth. So it's a very thin line, but it's important that we know the distinction between consumers being screwed, investors being made over, and depositors being being shafted. So all of these things just to protect you so that the little money you have in your pocket does not disappear, because it's hard enough living, not to talk of your savings being eroded.
Mr. Awani, what do you think MTN is up to with the last weekend's rejig of its board of directors, bringing big names on board, two former presidents of South Africa and Ghana, and of course here in Nigeria, His Royal Highness, the Emir of Kano, Mohammed Sanusi II?
I think it's important to know that MTN is, I would say, almost the largest provider of GSM services across sub-Saharan Africa. I think MTN has been very successful, but MTN has become a victim of its own success. In fact, that people see them as a provider, some people see them as exploitative, some are wrongly for the wrong reasons. And even regulators have taken their pound of flesh. So what MTN is doing is pressing the reset button and deciding that, look, if we are going to be known as Africa's #1 provider, then we need some muscle on our board. But don't forget that Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the president of South Africa today, was the chairman of MTN in the previous setting. I think that the introduction by listing is a great thing. I think the appointment of Lamido Sanusi is a great thing, because basically he's going to be out there protecting the interests of Nigeria and protecting the interests of MTN. So MTN is becoming part of the host community in Nigeria. In other words, their shares are going to be listed by introduction. They are going to be investing in their corporate social responsibility. They are going to be investing in the network and the backbone. They have the spectrum. And it's going to be a massive opportunity for Nigerians to invest in a company that has revenues in excess of 1.2 trillion naira per annum from this country alone. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. I think it's welcome. And you can only say that there are better days ahead for telco in general and MTN in particular.
Mr. Bismarck, CEO at Financial Derivatives Company, thank you very much for your insights this morning. Your first word on these two big stories that came through the weekend, economist and Chief Economic Counselor for Channels Television. Thank you very much. I do have a very profitable day and business week ahead.